Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello, my friends. It's bonus time. That's right. Not only is this episode 81 of the Sample Chapter Podcast, but this is a very special bonus episode with Multimedia Storyteller Joseph VanBuren. Maybe you're wondering, what is a multimedia storyteller? You're going to find out. This was one of those episodes that was built as a bonus because you are getting something very special. And normally when I've done these bonus episodes in the past, I did them on a Thursday. But I tell you what, Joseph has put together, I think, is just fitting for a Friday. Something to take you into the weekend because, man, it's just such a great episode. Now, I call Joseph JVB a lot during the interview, and it's because we're both fans of the Mando Method podcast. You've heard me talk about before. Armand Rosamilia and Chuck Buddha have both been guests on the show, and they were even together on the show once with one of their books that they wrote together. And Joseph and I both have been longtime fans of their show. Joseph also writes in periodically, like I do, so I get to hear his name, but usually they call him JVB. They've come to know him well. I've fallen into that as well, of calling him JVB, so that's what you're going to hear from me a lot as we get going. Naturally, in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about the Mando Method. We talk about that show. We talk about setting goals, the water and oil of horror poetry, and something that makes this very, very special is that he makes individual soundtracks for each of his books and puts those out there so that if you pick up a book and then you grab this soundtrack, you can listen to it as you're reading. They have this feel to it. And what's very special is he actually created a soundtrack just for this episode of the Sample Chapter Podcast. I didn't even get to hear it until just recently when I was getting ready to start putting this show together. He sent it to me. So at the time that we was recording, you hear me talk about like, oh, it's a surprise, because it was a surprise for me. It's going to be a surprise for you. And oh my gosh, it blew me away. I just listened to it for maybe the fifth or sixth time again. And I mean, still goosebumps. It's an amazing episode. His reading is going to blow you away. And I think people are going to really love this episode. They're going to download it and listen to it over and over many times, just like I have. Before we get over to that interview, I do want to thank, as always, my very special sponsors, U-Sto-All out of Warrensburg, Missouri. If you are in need of self-storage and you want to put something in the safest, most secure, and cleanest place that you can find around Warrensburg, look no further than U-Sto-All. They have both climate control and non-climate control, fully fenced-in facilities, LED lighting. The place looks like a football field at night. I mean, it's all lit up. 70 cameras recording everything that goes on around both facilities. And I mean, the place is clean. You wouldn't believe how nice and neat it is. Check them out online. Go to U-Stor-All.net for more information. That is the letter U, STORALL.net. Of course, I also want to thank my favorite writing software, Scrivener. Scrivener has everything you need. You could have your notes in there, your character notes. You're going through there and you're trying to remember, oh, what was that guy's name I said in chapter 1? Boom, it's right there. And speaking of that, one of my favorite things is I'm no longer scrolling through trying to figure out, oh, where is that chapter? All the chapters are listed on the side. So now if you ever need to find something in one chapter or another, just flip right to it. There's no scrolling and searching. And let's say as you go, you decide, you know what, that chapter doesn't work there anymore. Oh man, I've got to copy and cut and paste over here so that I can move around. No. Scrivener has a very special thing called corkboard. All the chapters come up on little file cards. You just move the file card over where you want it. It's so easy. It's so wonderful. Highly, highly, highly recommend you go check them out. I've got a link in the show notes, so don't forget to do that. And don't forget, if you decide you're going to buy it, enter code CHAPTER and save yourself 20%. You'll hear more about that here in just a moment with a commercial from Scrivener. Of course, I also want to thank my friends over at Pop Goes the Culture Network. They share this show as well as about a dozen other podcasts ranging from movies to pop culture to geek stuff to oh my gosh, just so many different ones. It's I can't even keep track of all the different shows they have on there, but it's really, really cool stuff. I've got about 3 or 4 of them that I listen to on a regular basis. Click on the show notes, get yourself on over to popgoestheculture.com to find out more. And you know what? I think I'm even going to include a link to the Mando Method podcast because JVB and I are fans of it. I think you ought to check it out as well. So check that out in the show notes. Armand and Chuck, I may not be in your network, but hey, it's a great show. Like I said, I've already talked about the interview with Joseph, so I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's get us right on over to that interview and his incredible reading. That's coming up right after a word from our sponsor. I'm telling you, goosebumps. Jason here. Hey, I wanted to take a moment and tell you about my favorite writing tool, Scrivener. Now, I know you've heard about Scrivener because their writing software has been embraced by hundreds of thousands of other writers like you and I, from the novice to best-selling novelists. The reason we all use it is because of Scrivener's core concept to bring all the writing tools you use together in a single application. And with tools like automatic backup, character maps, project goals, and let's not forget that amazing corkboard, you can see why I use Scrivener every day. As a bonus for Sample Chapter Podcast listeners, use code CHAPTER for 20% off your desktop version. Scrivener writing software, built by writers for writers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here at the Sample Chapter Podcast. We are back with multimedia storyteller and poet, a new friend of mine, and a longtime fellow fan of the Mando Method podcast, just like myself. I'm talking about JVB, Joseph VanBuren. Joseph, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
The pleasure is all mine. It's nice to have a face to put it to, even though I know like my face isn't up there, but you know what I look like. So that's
you look like a bunch of words. Sample Chapter Podcast. I see you.
Tell the audience a little bit about yourself, man.
Oh man, well, I'd like to call myself a multimedia storyteller. I've been a music artist for about 20 years. I dabbled in writing here and there, but I didn't really start taking it too seriously and trying to get published until recently. I graduated from college at 40 last year and decided, hey, I'm going to try to get into publishing while I was doing that. And basically it's because I'm getting old and, jumping around on stage and doing all that and doing shows and staying up late, getting too much for me. So I'm reining it in and I'm putting out poetry and I'm going to be moving into fiction and all of it as a soundtrack. And that's about what I do.
You know, what I love about this and love about your story is that you're not letting life hold you back. You're not going like, oh, I'm too old to do this. I'm too old to go back to school. No, you're going out there and doing it. And I love that, man. Now, was that hard for you? Was it hard to find that courage to do that?
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard. Like, I wanted to go back to school for a long time, but I was living pretty much like a nomad when I was doing music. I was literally couch surfing. I'm from New York. I took a Amtrak to California. I was all over the place just trying to find, where I belong and all that. Making cool music along the way, but just really being a broken mess. And in the back of my mind the whole time, I was like, I should just go back to school. That's just kind of I'm a nerd deep down, but I wanted to be a party animal for a while. So, I lived that life until it wasn't really sustainable anymore. Actually had a bad DUI that kind of brought light to my eyes, and set me on the straight path. And also meeting who's now my wife, Renee, she really helped me straighten up and go back to school. And so now I'm trying to be on more of a quiet, settled path. and writing goes along with that because it's more of a solitary thing, and it's to me it's more of a meditative thing. And at this point, I figure if I can get a bachelor's degree at 40 years old, then I can pretty much do anything, and so can anyone else. Like from all that stuff I went through to do that. So now I'm trying to put work out there, if for no other reason, just to show people exactly like kind of what you said. It's not too late. Whatever, you might feel old, you might feel like you went through a lot. Just take little steps and do it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and longtime listeners are, it's no secret that for me, like I had wanted to write most of my adult life. I mean, going back to when I was younger, but I just never made the time, made that conscious effort to, okay, this is it, until I found out I was going to be a grandpa the first time. And then that was like my wake up call. And my wife was always supporting me. She was always like, yeah, no, you can do it. You can do it. Go try it. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I got, Red Dead over here. I got another level I could beat, and that's really great too, But finding out I was going to be a grandpa was like that. Like, oh man, yeah, I don't think my kids I don't think my grandkids are going to really appreciate that grandpa beat, level whatever on this game, But, if they can see a library of books one day, then maybe that'll be something that, leaving my little legacy behind for them, that'd be a good thing.
Yeah, no doubt. Probably better than Here Lies Grandpa he owned in Halo.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. So you had a few fiction books. I know that you did those up, and then since then you've taken them down again. But I do know, since we're both fans of the Mando method, I know you've been writing some more fiction again lately. How's that going for you?
Yeah, it's slowly but surely. I feel like, and you talk about the Mando method, so we do the goals, right? And they set their goals, and then they tell us all to do it. So at the beginning of the year, my goal was, because last year I mostly focused on poetry. That's mostly, since I've gotten back into publishing, that's mostly what I've been focusing on. Mm-hmm. And I have my Mask trilogy out, and that's all poetry. And I was like, cool. I was like, now I'm going to transition into fiction. So that was kind of what I wanted to work on this year. And it didn't exactly go that way. I mean, I've been working on it, but I haven't put anything out. I accidentally joined, and I say that in quotes, accidentally joined a contest to write a poem a day in April for National Poetry Month. So I focused on that, and I got a whole other chapbook out of that is yet to be released. So, like that's kind of what we were talking about earlier before, like you set goals, and then sometimes you do other stuff that's just as good, just not what you thought you were going to do. That's kind of how I am at fiction. But I do have probably 2/3 of a fiction collection finished, which is mostly retellings of fairy tales and folklore and urban legends in kind of my own dark, weird style.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Yeah, and I mean, and like here on the website, I see you're even a award winner in a writing competition last year, 2018 Writer's Digest. That's awesome.
I got a poetry. It was an honorable mention. I have to be totally honest. But when they sent the things, they were like, "You're a winner, and I was like, "I'll take it." So it looks good. But I mean, that was kind of. I looked into those areas, and I was trying to find contests. I'm trying to build up my platform at first. I was like, what will make it? Because poetry is really tough. A lot of people just don't read it, or they're just not familiar with it. A lot of people have preconceived notions about what poetry is, and that it's too complicated or it's too, pretentious or whatever, and I kind of mix horror with poetry, and it almost seems like water and oil sometimes, but really it's not. There's a lot of horror poetry out there. There's a lot of dark stuff that's in that realm. And so I figured if I got the horror writers and the Writer's Digest right next to each other, it gives me a little credibility,
That's awesome, though. I mean, man, that's a big, still a big achievement. I mean, it doesn't matter if they were having that little, Oprah moment where they were throwing them all out there. That's fine. I'll take one.
Exactly.
If Oprah was to throw me,
it's like, in things like that, like huge contests like Writer's Digest, where
Yeah.
everyone and their asshole uncle is probably putting a poem in there. So I was like, yeah, like that's cool. I'm glad that they picked anything that was weird or dark, anything that was kind of out there. That's a win for all of us.
Exactly. And it's nice to see them reaching out there and trying something different, because this is what I was like really excited about when you reached out to me. I was like, oh my god, yes, I definitely want to talk to you, because the horror poet. I mean, this is like really, really interesting to me. And you said, there's lots of it out there, but this was a first for me. I wasn't aware of it. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, actually, I'll even put an extra layer on it and tell you that I'm kind of a horror hip hop poet because a lot of I do soundtrack music, but I've also done underground hip hop for a long time. So I bring certain elements of hip hop into it as well. To me, it's it sounds kind of like a weird mix probably to a lot of people, but to me, things like horror, hip hop, and heavy metal, they all kind of have that stigma to them, when you hear about them. And when you're growing up and you're into that stuff and parents are like, don't listen to that, don't watch that, whatever, it's too wild out there. But to me, all of those three things they speak for marginalized people. They speak for people who feel like they're outcasts or misunderstood in some way, and they need a voice to get out there. And that's, when I was growing up, when I was dealing with poverty and abuse and a lot of issues, I confided in a horror movie or a rap song or a metal song. Those were the things that got me out of my darkest moments. So now I incorporate all that into my poetry, because to me, it's all reflections of what we fear, the darkness we grew up in, and coming out of that. To me, it's all very positive in the end. But so it's like a mixed genre that really works to me. Like it really, they all reflect each other.
Wow, that's really fascinating, man. Yeah, and I can totally see like where you're coming from with that. I can see how that works really well.
Sometimes it doesn't at all, but I try not to publish those ones. Can't win them all.
Well, you've already got the 3 books out in the Mask series with the poets. Are each one of these along those same lines? So they have like the horror poetry within them?
Yeah, I tried to do kind of one of each, but they definitely all borrow from each other. So Shadow is definitely more horror and dark poetry. Persona is more of the hip hop and kind of revolutionary, like, fuck the system kind of thing. And then Self is more of my personal, from my actual childhood, and so that's more, I guess, of a general poetry kind of thing. But they definitely all influence each other, because that's how life is.
Right.
Nothing's one-sided, nothing's black and white. To me, it's all shades of gray. So even though Shadow's black and Persona's white and Self is gray, yeah, see, to me, it's all symbolic of everything being shades of gray.
Oh, wow. Okay. And like you were telling me before, that you like to come up with your own personalized soundtrack, and not in the way that like somebody might think like, oh yeah, I'm gonna find this song and this song. You make your own music for each book.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, tell me about this.
Well, yeah, I mean, when I was first coming up with the idea of this trilogy, and I was really on the fence, which I have been a lot in my life. I'm like, do I stick with music? Do I just go with poetry and forego music? And I didn't want to do that. Like I said before, I wanted to kind of get out of the live scene, all that. But I wanted, and also, there's just not enough hours in a day to do all the crazy ideas in your mind all the time. So I was like, okay, let's put it all together, and it took a lot of brainstorming, but I finally took this large mythos I've been creating since I was a teenager, actually, based off of a tabletop role-playing game I made long ago, is where these characters come from originally. And then I made the masks. The masks I've actually worn on stage as different stage personas. So I took all of that and made them instead as fictional characters in the storyline, made poems out of it, and then made the soundtrack to it, so that I'm hoping each component stands on its own. Like you can listen to one of the albums or you can read one of the books, but also I hope people realize, oh shit, like you put this all together and it's like they're really, each thing is an ingredient in this bigger recipe.
Right, right. So is this something that like people should maybe listen to this while they're going through your book?
That's my idea. Yeah. I mean, I hope people do that. I don't know. I'm kind of weird and nerdy like that. Like I have specific playlists on Spotify for writing certain things, and I often like if I have to work on a certain kind of thing, I'm like, oh, I need classical music for this, like
Right, right.
I do that. I don't know if a lot of people do that, but it is my hope that someone will take the soundtrack to that book and play it in the background while they read it. Obviously, everyone reads at different speeds, so they're not going to match up exactly with the song titles. But I hope that when I wrote, like when I did the Shadow soundtrack, for example, I read over my own poem 100 times and then listened to the rhythms and the mood that came out of those words and tried to transcribe that into music and sound.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that it's a perfect fit if people listen to it while they read it.
And this is pretty cutting edge. I've just been hearing about this, just little bits here and there from other places over the last year, where I think there's somebody out there creating soundtracks for different books, and it's a very indie thing. So you fall within that realm. So this is it's a really cool thing because I mean, as writers, yeah, a lot of us we like to write to music, and it's like you said, we'll pull up a classical or something else. I like the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack is what I liked with my first book, and yeah, I gotta get those drums in there, And,
Oh yeah.
but the music brings out that creativity, and I can see that being just one more layer of opening yourself up to the experience that is reading a like this, a beautiful book of poetry that it might not be the kind of poetry some people think of, but it's still beautiful in that you're exposing yourself through those words. And it's a peek within there, and it's not just the words, but it's also the music that you created to go along with it. And this sounds amazing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean that's what I hope. Like like especially like I said before, at this advanced age, when I was like, thinking about jumping into it, it's like how can I stand out? You know what I mean? Like there is some conscious thought into it. Like I don't want to just be a music artist. I don't want to just be a poet or an author. I think by putting it together, that's the best chance I have of having something that's totally unique. Hopefully, kind of what you said before, like an experience, not just I read this book and it was great. I listened to this album, it was great, but put it all together, and I hope it brings a full experience. And if I was better at video editing and graphics and stuff, I'd be adding that too. Yeah. I always make a promo video with everything I come out with, but that's one area where one day hopefully I can hire some help or work with someone. But I do want to expand into that. Like I said, I used to do a lot of RPG games. Honestly, playing Dungeons and Dragons is probably one of the things that inspired me to be a writer in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Become a storyteller. So, and I kind of still, I haven't played in ages, but I still kind of take a dungeon master approach to world building when it comes to, writing fiction and poetry. And I hope to be able to expand that in the future. If I could make a Masks video game, that'd be the shit.
Wow, yeah.
That'd just be everything. You got the words, the look, the voices, and the music, and that'd probably be like bucket list thing right there. If I had one, that'd be on the top.
So you've got the music to go along with it, and then the poetry, and then you said there's going to be a 3-book series. So you got those 3 are done up. Now, how do you find the inspiration? How do you go about looking within yourself to write a poem that like here with book 3, where you're looking within yourself like this is, and for everybody's so everybody knows, book 3, Mask, Self. This is the one we're going to be hearing from today, and it's going to be, oh my gosh, y'all, just stay tuned. You're in for a treat because I'm not going to tell you right now, but stay tuned. This is going to be really cool. But yeah, looking within yourself like this to come up with a poem, what kind of experiences do you relate to that you're finding words to express it?
Well, it depends. A lot of, like, for this book in particular, a lot of it was just me. It's really just little scenes of my life, and I kind of put it in somewhat chronological order, and then every once in a while there's just a random, like, kind of an observing life in society, whatever. But a lot of it is like me, like, looking back. Like, I have one which will be part of the reading called Fish Out of Water, and it's a memory from when I was, I don't know, 7 or 8, and it seems like a very, subtle, like, nondescript scene if you think about it, but I in the poetry, I kind of explained why it was so profound to me, this moment, and what was going on in my head, and how twisted it is looking back on it, But, like, like I said before, I grew up in a lot of poor conditions, and I survived that, so I feel like it's my obligation to tell that. And so a lot of times in Mask Self, it's me looking at these little slices of things that I got through, and, hopefully shining a little light on how I did it, if I even understand it myself. It's a lot of just self-exploration. Sometimes poetry, you don't know what the hell you're going to say. You just, sometimes you just get an idea, an image, and you just start writing. And then you revise it until it becomes something. And if it doesn't become something, whatever, put it to the side. But sometimes you realize in the process, or I should say, I guess I speak for myself, I realize when I'm writing a poem, one image could actually, halfway through it, I realize, oh, this is what I'm actually trying to say. And this is what it could say to somebody else. You know what I mean? Because those are really two different things. And writers know that. And sometimes other people may not know that. Writing for yourself, sometimes we write for therapy. We write just to get the stuff out of our head, whatever. But then thinking about how it's going to be to readers, how other people are going to take it, that's a kind of a separate thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, okay. Man.
So when I first wrote all these poems or whatever, it's like, okay, I'm just getting this out and this is how I feel, blah, blah. But then when I put it together in the books, I kind of wanted to map it out. Like, all right, because, the shadow and the persona are parts of me. They're characters. They're Joe Doe and Agasta Shillelagh. Those are 2 characters in my mythos. But they're parts of me. They're characters I've played on stage. And, people who know me personally could probably know the sides of me that they are. You know what I mean? But when I put them in these books, I'm hoping other people can be like, wow, this character's been through a lot, and I can relate. Whether that character is me, the self, or the other sides of me. Which now I sound like I have multiple personality disorder, and maybe.
No, I don't think so at all. I think it sounds like you found a most excellent way to do some self-exploration, and you're relating it to people the best way that you can. And
right.
that says a lot. That's beautiful, man. And it's mad props to you, because I, as somebody who just writes thriller fiction, I sit here and I'm just thinking, like, well, what's going to happen next? And it's like, all right, yeah, I'll go with that. I don't think I could write poetry in that way. I don't think it's within me right now. I mean, I don't know. Then again, we were talking about earlier, never say no. We're never too old to learn something. So let's see what happens.
Right. And also, on the other hand, you never know who's reading your, thriller book, whatever, and getting something out of it that you didn't even know. You know what I mean?
That's true.
I mean, another one of my poems in this book is called "You Created a Horror Lover," and it's basically about, I grew up on, I call it the golden era, the late 70s to early 90s. I call that the golden era of horror movies. That's what I grew up on. And, those movies got me through a lot of shit. And, you look back on them now and they just seem like cheesy slashers, Freddy and Jason and all that, to some people, whatever. But I I'll break it down, man. We can sit down with a couple beers and I will philosophically break down those movies and what they all mean and specifically what it meant to a young kid who felt like like he couldn't get anywhere in the world, and watching all those final girls make it through to the end and conquer the boogeyman. You know what I mean?
Yep.
They're just, okay, they're cool, great slasher movies, and they have mad sequels because there's a formula that works. True. But to some people, it means the world that formula works. So, it goes both ways. I don't take anything for granted. I hope I never, I like to explain the thinking that goes behind my poetry and the symbolism in it and all that. But at the same time, I don't ever think like that's better or more effective than another kind of writing or any entertainment for that matter. I think art has a place in somebody's heart, and the thing is just to get it out to those people.
Oh man, well said. Yeah, I'm not as old as Armand and Chuck. Those guys are ancient. But I've got you by a couple of years. Yeah. love you guys. Love you, Armand. I love you, Chuck. So in case you hear this, but yeah. But no, I've got you by a few years, and yeah, I remember growing up, and I mean all those movies, and I'm sure Carpenter and all those guys, they never considered that they were making classics. How they're considered today. But yeah, I mean you never know what you're gonna do that may touch somebody else, and yeah, I mean it's there could be the whole book of poems, or it could be just one poem within there that is going to touch somebody's life, and I really hope so.
Man. It could be just a sentence, That's what's really powerful about it. We get really caught up sometimes in all the marketing and just stuff like that, but that's how I bring that from my experience in the music industry. It's like I never tried to make pop music, I was into rap, but I wasn't into commercial rap whatsoever. I was always into the more underground stuff. It's just my style. And I always thought that. I was like, I know a lot of people aren't going to get this, but if there's one person out there, and it's happened to me a few times, somebody's been like, dude, that one song, Cemetery Flowers, that opened my mind, man, that changed my life. And that was worth all the years of what I perceived at the time to be failures, or, just coming short of the mark I was trying to hit, whatever. And I take that same mind state to writing now. I'm like, if I can get something out there, if I can get a book out there, it doesn't have to be a big seller. People don't have to be reviewing it and talking about it on social media. But when that one person comes to me and says that poem or that line or that whole book or whatever it is, I feel that, and my job's done. I'm good.
Amen, brother. Amen. Well, hey, I know you've got a few poems that you've sold so far this year. What else you got coming out this year?
Well, I'm working on the complete trilogy of my Masks trilogy. So it'll be all of them in one thing, and I have some bonus material. I'm hoping to get that and the album for Self done and released. Hoping to have all that done by September. Like I told you earlier, I'm taking a trip and I'm cutting out of humanity for like a week or so. I'm trying to get everything ready before then. After that, to be honest, it's kind of a crapshoot. I have a lot of projects on hand, but going through my goals with the Mando method and looking at what I want to do versus what I have on deck, it's weird. I have a whole nother chapbook of poems that I didn't expect to have. And I have a collection of short stories that is not quite as far as I wanted it to be. And I also have a novella that's totally written, but I need to go through it and edit that. That's something I want to shop to, I'm hoping to start shopping small publishers with that one. Mm-hmm. So these are all things. And also in order to hit my goal, I have to get 2 more, acceptances of the submissions I'm sending out. So let's see. Last year I got 3 anthology acceptances. So this year so far I got 2 magazine acceptances. So I have to get 2 more to hit my goal and to beat last year. So that's what I'm shooting for.
Outstanding, man. Where can people find you? Where can they follow you?
Oh man, Twitter is probably where I'm most active. I'm at JVB Psychofunk, which is SYKOPHUNK. I know I shouldn't have spelled it that way, but I did. And pretty much all other social media. I think I finally did that thing where you like brand yourself across the same way. For a long time, I had different names everywhere. So yeah, Facebook, Instagram, it's JVB Psychofunk. Of course, josephvanburen.com. You can get on my mailing list there. I do send that out, I don't know, twice a month. I try not to bother people too much. And I have a WordPress blog, Goodreads, of course. I do have a YouTube channel. I would love to get more active, but it's not too active. But the thing is, I have like a decade and a half of music videos and stuff on there. So there's still a lot of cool stuff to find there too. Psychofunk. Nice. So that's where I'm at.
All right. And we'll have links to all of that in the show notes, everybody. So that way, after you hear this episode, you can just click on there, go to any of those. And I know from going to his website too, you got links in there as well. So once you go to one, you're going to find everything else too. So, of course, get on over to Amazon and pick up some of these books. They are on KU as well, I see. So everybody can just try it out and see what you think. And, man, JVB, thank you so much, man. I really, really appreciate you coming on. And this has been a blast, man. I feel really enlightened.
No doubt. Thank you, man. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I really appreciate what you do, man, supporting all the indie authors. It's awesome.
It's my pleasure, buddy. Ladies and gentlemen, all right, like I said, we have a treat for you today because it's, you're used to hearing the sample chapter. What you're going to experience this time is you're going to experience the full multimedia storyteller himself. Ladies and gentlemen, JVB, Joseph VanBuren, with a multimedia experience with Mask Book 3, Self.
Poems from Mask Self by Joseph VanBuren. You have created a horror lover. You have created a horror lover. Spawned from the Hudson Valley, New York's Ghost Central, America's most haunted. From native curses to Dutch imps to Revolutionary War spirits to Ichabod, everybody knows the name Crane. The childhood brush with death, blood of strangers resurrecting my breath, and that's cool. I'll just chill here with all the other spirits. The pain felt firsthand and backhand. No fear of the creature living under my bed when my mother has a monster in hers and 100 more dwelling inside my head. Bullies at school can't scare me. The abandoned asylums and mortuaries, hide and seek in cemeteries, exploring dark woods and dark rooms in the dark corners of my mind, no matter the shadows I find, because of the shadows I find. The trauma of being a teenager, sinking in self-harm, drowning in depression, escape only found in that magic elixir, and in its absence, anxiety, worthless waste. The recently archived reruns, starring a nomadic addict, a troubled troubadour, a hopelessly outnumbered demon hunter who lost his way in the haze just to wake up one night in the back of an ambulance realizing how uncommon second chances are, let alone third. Now it's time to return to my roots, to the darkness I call truth, to the past lessons learned and the future blessings earned. The facing of my fears like when Nancy told Freddie he's nothing but shit. The use of my survival skills just as Jason's final prey never seems to quit. The embrace of balance between pain and pleasure as if a Cenobite and Hellraiser unlocked the mind's greatest treasure. You crazy, shadowy, cannibalistic bearer of knowledge and wisdom, you have created a horror lover. Don't bother dreaming about leaving this neighborhood because there's nothing for you outside of these few streets. And don't talk to strangers when you walk home from school because they're probably creeps with AIDS. And don't complain about walking to the store because we need milk. And don't walk down Main Street after dark because it's nothing but junkies on one side and hookers on the other.
Don't ask for anything in the store because we probably can't buy it with food stamps. And don't leave your food on the plate because there are starving kids in China. And don't come back for seconds because those are leftovers for tomorrow. Don't worry about what the kid in your class has because his family are a bunch of snobs anyway. And don't bother making friends at this school either because we won't be here long. And don't ask who the landlord is and why we were always avoiding him because that is adult business. Don't listen to that rap crap because you shouldn't hear that stuff. And don't watch this part of the movie because you shouldn't see that stuff. And don't play Dungeons and Dragons because it's satanic. And don't bother learning how to play that keyboard because it's just a toy and not a real instrument. And don't play that damn heavy metal so loud because it's just noise and not real music. And don't come out of your room until tomorrow because you were grounded. And don't, I repeat, do not hide a pen and notebook under your bed so that you can still write while you're grounded because you're just wasting your time with your stupid stories anyway. Fish out of water. Shredded fish flesh falls on my mother's shoulder, shrapnel from her husband's firecracker experiment, the victim reeled in from the Hudson. Worse things have happened by the river, but none of them before my eyes, squinting from the sun or from the stupidity. My mother freaks and screams, glares at the laughing Leviathan as if contemplating murder. I wish she would. This is the moment, as it rains gills and singed guts by the water, hospital waste green, sulfuric tuna and beer-battered breath. I should realize that his sadistic addiction to inflicting pain has been washed up from the torrents of his own tortured past. But I have only lived 9 years, half of that time spent hating him. Whatever a suicide bomber is, I am praying for one. Rip him from our home and stuff his mouth with a bomb and light that long fuse and listen to that hiss as the flame slowly crawls towards his face, and after the loudest boom ever, my mother's cries become whispers, then silence. I return to the current so I can breathe again. The water is still, riddled with ripples. Battle scars. My battle scars are the roadmap to my past, and all the shattered stars are the cold cracks in the glass as if I had a jar to contain the pain. Instead it stains the brain and leaves me feeling insane. Memories, they are the fuel to my fire, and this is therapy. What can I do but desire another remedy? I'm self-medicated and jaded, don't want to be faded. My goal is stated, but I'm still underrated. I hate it. It's critical. So many wounds, both emotional and physical. So many times I thought that's all she wrote. It's typical, cause I was a manic depressive. But these days the way I contain my panic's impressive. Anxiety, mostly due from living in a crazy ass society. Mostly true, but the prince inside give me that sobriety. I still battle demons, they're kicking and screaming. While I'm awake or dreaming, they might be the reason life has meaning. I use this energy to light my torch and step on the battlefield so I can smite this force. Fight fire with fire and I ignite the source. But if I'm too close to my own flames, I might get scorched. And these battle scars constantly tell the story of all my history, from the gory to the glory. As the world burns. As the world burns, we struggle to benefit in the short term. The media and corporations sell us their scares. We try to purchase futures, but we don't even care about the life that connects one soul to the next. We're all children of the earth we're supposed to protect, and yet our intellect seemed to evolve for self-profit, digging a cosmic grave with no signs of stopping. Governments, yeah, they fund industry and war, but without an atmosphere we work and fight no more. We all die and decompose deep in the earth, becoming fossil fuels for humanity's rebirth, or whatever comes along in a billion years. Mother Nature, she's crying out a billion tears. We have a billion fears, too much anxiety, reflections of what we choose as priority, and we will suffocate in the ashes of all we have earned as the world burns. The greatest poem ever is not the one I am reading, is not one that you have already read or studied, is not one you already love or loathe, but has been written by someone who is too self-conscious to show it to anyone else, by someone who believes the nasty things others have said, by someone who hides in the thick shadows cast by a broken past, by someone who has been silenced by the system, by someone who has been blinded by the pain, by someone whose self-esteem is buried in trauma, by someone whose self-destruction could give birth to a revolution, by someone who can mend the world but cannot fix the self, by someone who is the universe but is invisible.
Oh my gosh, what did I tell you? That was Joseph VanBuren with some hip-hop horror poetry from his latest mask book, Self. Oh my gosh, it was incredible. I loved it. Once again, goosebumps. Dude, I don't know how you do it, JVB, but that was incredible. Hey, make sure you click the links in the show notes to find out more about Joseph VanBuren, our sponsors, and friends of the show. And of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, so that way next week you don't miss out when we come back with another author, another book, and another sample chapter. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again real soon.